Mr. Speaker. We've got two scandals now that the government is embroiled in. One is the We scandal, and the second one is about a mortgage company where one of the executives is the husband to the chief of staff. In both of these scandals, what we're seeing is Liberals helping themselves instead of helping people. While people are worried about what's going to happen when CERB ends in August, the Liberal government seems to be too busy helping themselves. When will Canadians know what's going to happen at the end of August for those who are relying on CERB?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I can assure every member of the House, every parliamentarian, every Canadian that we have a very robust plan to include everyone and not leave anybody behind. As the Prime Minister laid out a comprehensive framework, what's to come next, we're transitioning people to EI. We're creating a parallel benefit for people who aren't still within the EI system, creating a caregiver benefit, a sickness benefit. Monday, we announced a uniform unemployment rate across the country as a precursor to what comes next. We've read
the honourable member for Burnaby South.
Well, the problem is that the Liberal government is too busy helping themselves to help people, and right now people don't know what that plan is. They are worried. EI only covers about 40% of Canadians. So when will the government make it really clear? When will the Liberal government make sure Canadians know that every Canadian worker will be supported and that no one will be left behind? When will we know the details?
Honourable Minister.
Mr. Chair, I can assure everyone now we've been assuring Canadians for months and nobody will be left behind. Absolutely, we have a plan in place that will make sure that workers are supported. We want to make sure that we encourage people to work when it's available and reasonable to do so. We know that it won't be for people in many sectors. We have a plan for them in the coming weeks. I would say in the coming days, but definitely in the coming week or so, we will be.
The honourable member for Burnaby South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The unanimous motion was passed today. That shows the will of the House that we need to help parents get back to work by ensuring that there is affordable and quality childcare and ensuring that schools have the funding they need. So when will we expect that? When will the Prime Minister make sure kids are safe to go back to school and that parents can count on reliable, affordable childcare? When will the government make these commitments by supporting provinces to deliver the childcare and the education that will keep kids safe?
Honourable Minister.
Mr. Chair, I want to thank the honourable member for the really important question. In addition to our long-term commitments on early learning and childcare, we are delivering this year alone $400 million to provinces and territories as part of the bilateral agreements on early learning and childcare. And in addition to that, I want to point to the honourable member the fact that as part of the Safe Restart Agreement, we are transferring an additional $625 million for early learning and childcare to help a sector that has been hard hit by COVID-19, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable member for Burnaby South.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Well, we know the figures that are required, and what the government is proposing right now is wholly inadequate. It is simply not enough to provide the childcare and the educational funding supports that provinces need. So when will this Liberal government commit to the adequate funding, the sufficient funding to make sure parents will know that their kids are safe in school?
Honourable Minister.
I find it really hard for the leader of the NDP to claim that $625 million plus $400 million just in the next 8 months is inadequate. That is completely opposite to what we're doing. We're providing federal leadership and resources to back the safe restart of the early learning and childcare sector. We've been there for parents for the long term, and we're there for parents as this sector recovers from COVID-19, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you.
Honourable member for Burnaby South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, the minister should know that all the experts have made it really clear that that is simply just not enough money if we're talking about childcare for everyone that needs it, and we're talking about supports for education for all the provinces and territories. It is not enough. So that shows the government is not committed. Will this government, will the Liberal government commit to the appropriate level of funding to make sure parents have childcare and they have the adequate supports in education so their kids are safe, so people can go back to work?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, government that has created over 40,000 affordable childcare spaces is committed to creating another 250,000 childcare spaces that are affordable. A federal secretariat investing over $1.2 billion over the next 8 months to question the sincerity and the commitment of a government like that is demonstrating not only leadership, but backing that leadership with resources for this sector. It boggles my mind what the leader of the NDP is talking about.
The Honourable Opposition House Leader.
Yesterday in the National Post, the Prime Minister's office refused to answer some questions, so I would like to give the government the opportunity to provide some clarity. Did the Prime Minister or anyone in his office meet or speak with Rob Silver, who is the husband of the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff, Katie Telford, about commercial rent? Yes.
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the Honourable Member for the question. The Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation is an independent government body that works on delivering on the Canada Emergency Commercial Rental Assistance Program, a program that is doing a lot to help small businesses and employees across the country.
Opposition House Leader.
Very simple yes or no question, Mr. Speaker. Did the Prime Minister or anyone in his office meet with Rob Silver either in person, via telephone, via Zoom conference or text about the issue of commercial rent? Yes?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'm really happy to discuss the details of the Canada Emergency Commercial Rental Assistance Program, a program that has delivered help to over 72,000 small businesses across the country and over 670,000 employees.
Honourable Opposition House Leader.
I will take that as a yes. So when did the Prime Minister or someone in his office meet with Mr. Silver? What dates and who met with Mr. Silver?
Good question.
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Canada Emergency Commercial Rental Assistance Program is doing exactly what it was supposed to be doing, which is delivering help to small...
Honourable Opposition House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Has the Finance Minister or anyone in his office met with Mr. Silver about commercial rent?
The Honourable Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to just address what the Honourable Member has asked. The Office of the Ethics Commissioner was consulted, a screen was put in place, and all steps were followed regarding this matter.
Well, Opposition House Leader.
Speaker, then they should be able to answer the question, and I take that as a yes. Who in the Finance Minister's office met with Mr. Silver, and when did they meet with Mr. Silver?
Good question.
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I want to repeat that the Office of the Ethics Commissioner was consulted, a screen was put in place, and all the appropriate steps were taken.
The Honourable Opposition House Leader.
Speaker, evasive non-answers. 6 months into this pandemic, 6 years of government, and this Prime Minister will be remembered for a $343 billion deficit and setting the lowest bar ever for a Prime Minister's conduct in the history of this country. This Prime Minister inappropriately groped a woman. He wore blackface. He and his friends and family took a prepaid, lavish vacation to Billionaire Island. He interfered in an SNC criminal trial. He then fired his Attorney General because she wouldn't go along with his cronyism. He has tried to give almost $1 billion to his friends at WE, who not only, we now know, have been campaigning for him, meeting with tens of thousands of young people, trying to get them to vote Liberal. But we've also found out WE has given the Prime Minister's family and friends, family especially, hundreds of thousands of dollars. And now we found out that the husband of the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff got a nice $83 million contract from the Prime Minister. It really is with the Liberals about who you know, not what you know. This makes the Liberal sponsorship scandal look like child's play, actually. Right. So can the Prime Minister tell us, oh, he's not here, sorry. Can somebody on the side tell us why the Prime Minister thinks the rules do not apply to him?
I don't think I have to remind the honourable members that we can't refer to someone's absence or presence in the House. I just want to remind everyone that it's not something that we can do, or in the committee for that matter. The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, and it's been a while since I've had the opportunity to answer to the opposition House Leader, and I will remind her that we do have officers of Parliament, and we take the work that they do very seriously. They work independently of this place, and we have always assured that we will work and comply with their offices. I have a little bit dated numbers, but I think it's important, because we are in the midst of a pandemic, that Canadians be reminded. June 28th, these are the numbers. 8.16 million individuals helped by the Canada Emergency Response Business. The CEWS, the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy, has supported over 3 million employees. Approximately 3.7 million families benefited from the CCB top-up of $300. That's a tax-free Canada Child benefit, which the Conservatives voted against. 12 million individuals and families received a special one-time payment through the GST credit. 1.4 billion to over 600,000 students through the CESB. 6.7 million seniors received the one-time tax-free payment of $300. 2.2 million Canadians of the 6.7 also received an additional $200. The list is long because right now, Mr. Speaker, our focus is on Canadians ensuring that they have money in their pockets so they have the supports that they need. The Conservatives.
Corrupt politicians enrich themselves secretly outside the rule of law through kickbacks, bribes, and special favors, or they simply direct state funds to themselves directly or indirectly and their associates. Now, we've had $343 billion in deficits, $1.2 trillion in debt, and that gives a government a lot of room to misappropriate that wealth, or in the case of the debt of our nation, to direct those state funds to themselves or their associates. And there's a reason why these scandals are profoundly scandalous, Mr. Speaker, especially during a pandemic. It's because the allegations are that Trudeau, his family, his connected insiders, and his friends sought to enrich themselves during a pandemic that is impoverishing millions of Canadians and killing thousands. And while those governed are losing their homes, losing their businesses, losing their jobs, and losing their futures, the Trudeaus and their family and friends are doing just fine. That's how a kleptocracy works. There's the We scandal. There's the Prime Minister's family enriching themselves. There's the CMHC scandal with Rob Silver, the Chief of Staff husband. And now we find out that Frank Baylis, a former Liberal MP, has received an undisclosed value contract for $100,000 in non-health approved ventilators. The sponsorship scandal will look like a speck of sand in a desert when this is all over. And when this is all over, Trudeau and Morneau will be just fine. So I ask this question on behalf of every Canadian before more stories surface, and they will. How many more Liberal-connected friends, families, insiders have had their palms greased and have personally financially gained from this pandemic at the expense of Canadians who have suffered so much during this crisis? Will they be honest for once, or do we have to wait for the Auditor General to tell us?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to take us back to where we were in mid-March and talk about the things that we focused on for Canadians over the course of the last number of months. In mid-March, we obviously found ourselves in an unprecedented situation where Canadians were asked to stay home, to protect themselves, to protect their families, to protect other Canadians. And obviously that was the right decision from a health standpoint, but it had real implications from an economic standpoint. As a government, we took the reins at that time and said we need to think about how we can ensure that we support Canadians through this extraordinarily challenging time. The first thing we set out was the reality that we had so many Canadians that would not be receiving a paycheck. And that's how we came up with the Canada Emergency Response Benefit. We know that over the course of the last months that this benefit has helped millions, literally millions of Canadians to be able to have enough money for groceries, for rent, in order to keep their families surviving during a time of immense challenge. That was first and foremost our initiative. We moved forward with a wage subsidy because we recognized that we needed businesses to have a connection with their employees. They needed to have an incentive to keep their employees, even though in many cases they would not actually have the kind of work that they might normally have because they've been asked to stay home. So the wage subsidy has helped, again, millions of Canadians to keep their attachment with their job, to keep their ability to make money for themselves and their families through this challenging time. But Mr. Speaker, we didn't stop there. We knew that we needed to deal with all those people who were going through enormous stress. We recognized, for example, that seniors were finding costs that were more than they had historically experienced because they might have needed deliveries. They might have needed to get their medications or their food delivered in a way that they didn't previously have the ability to deal with. So we've found a way to support seniors during this time. We recognize that students wouldn't necessarily be able to get the jobs that they needed during the course of the summertime. So we put in place a benefit that would help students because we know we want to get them back to.
The Honourable Member for Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll be sharing my time with the Honourable Member for Regina Leuven, and quickly I'd just like to acknowledge the work of the Member for Regina Capel as Leader of Her Majesty's Loyal Opposition. This place is better for his service as leader. Now a question for the Liberals. They've used this pandemic to provide taxpayer dollars to their friends. I guess we shouldn't be surprised. This is exactly what they did during the national unity crisis of the 1990s. They saw an opportunity, and Canadians got the sponsorship scandal. They tried to feed money to their political allies at the WE organization, but thankfully, the opposition stopped them. But now we're learning that former Liberal MP Frank Baylis got his cut of the pandemic pie as well. Will the Liberals tell us what the exact dollar figure was for the contract that they gave to their friend? Just the amount. How much did Frank Baylis make in this deal?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I have to assure the House and all Canadians that there are measures in place to ensure that all information is made readily available. And I do want to echo the comments of, first of all, the member in regards to the Leader of the Official Opposition. I want to thank him for his service. I did not realize it was his last time in this House. And I do know that he works hard. And I do appreciate it. Though I don't agree with his policies, most of which, or their ideology, I do know that he works hard. And when we talk about friends, let's talk about Canadians. 8.16 million Canadians who receive the Canada Emergency Response Benefit. 3.7 million families who have benefited from the one-time top-up of the Canada Child Benefit, a tax-free benefit that we brought into place to help families with children who need the most by asking the wealthiest 1% of families not to take that benefit. Prior to our government being here, what the Harper Conservatives had done was give $100 for every kid across the board, regardless of income, and then they would tax it. So they would give it with one hand, and then April they would claw it back. That's not.
The Honourable Member for Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
Mr. Speaker, how much?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, this is publicly disclosed information. The number is $237 million, or just.
The Honourable Member for Regina Leuven.
My dad had a few phrases he always loved to use, like a leopard can't change his spots, or the early bird gets the worm. So now that I'm a father, it's my turn to add to these lifelong phrases. So my addition is going to be a liberal's going to liberal. Now, my son and daughter may ask me what this means. So here's a really short answer. A liberal will always believe that there's enough taxpayers' dollars to make his and her friends and family richer. So my question is to the Prime Minister. When will your family and your Laurentian elite friends have enough taxpayers' dollars?
Minister.
Speaker, I'm going to start my answer with the way the member started his question in regards to a leopard can't change his spots. I ran for office because the Conservatives pitted one group of Canadians against another. They helped their friends. But you know what they did? They actually helped out the wealthiest, and they project and they say that that's not the case. What did we do when we came into office? We lowered taxes on the middle-class Canadians by bringing in a new tax bracket and increasing them on the wealthiest 1% of Canadians. What did the Conservatives do? Well, their spots can't change, and that's why they voted against it. When we brought in the tax-free Canada Child Benefit, you know what the Conservatives did? They voted against it because they don't don't believe in giving a hand up to the people.
The honourable member for Regina Louvain.
Mr. Chair, that answer is ridiculous. Our country's never been more broken because of this party's divisive policies towards all Canadians. So my kids may ask Dad, what's a Liberal? And I'll give them a quick answer. Someone who seems incapable of passing up a crisis to help advance the prosperity of their friends and family. National unit crisis gave us a sponsorship scandal. Global pandemic gave us money for their rich friends and family. And because I like to have evidence, I'd say, kids, just look at the last few weeks. A contract to Liberal-friendly We for $9 million. A contract to a former Quebec MP for ventilators that has not been certified in a jurisdiction anywhere to date. And for the three-peat, a Liberal insider, an $84 million contract, by coincidence, to Mr. Trudeau's Chief of Staff's husband's company, where he's a VP. Mr. Chair, a Liberal is going to Liberal. So, to the Minister of Inclusion and Youth, the interim Minister of Inclusion and Youth, what is it about Liberals that make them so corrupt?
The Honourable Minister.
Speaker, I'm going to have to correct that member. I'm actually the first Minister of Diversity and Inclusion in Youth. And I am the first Minister of Diversity and Inclusion in Youth because it is a portfolio that our government takes seriously. Because we know that in Canada, diversity is our strength, but it's important that people actually be included. And what we have seen over the past few weeks is that this country has to do better, and we have to do more. And what I want to say to his young daughter, 7 years old, is today we have gender parity at the cabinet table. So just like men could succeed, so can women. When we talk about youth, a $9 billion suite of programs we brought in for students, including the Canada Emergency Student Benefit. And you know why they yell, Mr. Speaker? They yell because they don't want to talk about the facts. They don't want to talk about the supports that we have put in place for Canadians. We know that Canadians are hurting and struggling. We will stay focused on Canadians while the Conservatives stay focused on Conservatives. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
If I can interrupt, if I can all order. There's just something came to mind as I was sitting there, and I started doubting myself and asking questions to myself. But when there's a committee of the whole, in these exchanges, and according to the third edition of the House of Commons and Procedures Practices on page 932, chapter 19, in the exchanges, members should nevertheless always refer to one another by the names of their ridings, as is done in the House. I just want to remind everyone what the rules are, and I'm sure this is a learning experience for all of us. Now we'll proceed. The Honourable Member for Lakeland Stubbs.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. It's sort of amazing to hear that member talk about gender parity when the women over there, the most competent ones, they all seem to get demoted, booted, or have to do the king's dirty work. So I don't know. I guess it's all talk. I'll split my time with the member for Foothills today. The Liberals are no doubt devastating families in Lakeland. No federal help for this year's agricultural emergency in my riding, with families facing a third year of damaged crops and a minister that hikes costs on them and dismisses farmers as being emotional. It's been 140 days since the finance minister promised help in hours for oil and gas, but not one application has been made or granted for large employers. Not one mid-sized loan has been granted by the BDC because the conditions are prohibitive, and the methane fund has yet to be launched. Drillers and oil services are left out. Fixed loans won't bridge the year. Tens of thousands of Albertans are losing everything in real time. But in 2 weeks, these Liberals, they were able to approve almost $1 billion for the PM's friends at We, who pay the Prime Minister's family members and campaign for the Liberals. And a former Liberal MP, he recently scored a lucrative contract for ventilators before they were approved by Health Canada. Yeah. This is all bad. But what's worse is this. The Liberals' failures and corruption harm Canadian unity. Pierre Trudeau's strategist once said, "Screw the West, we'll take the rest." It's clear the second wave just might be worse. Why are these Liberals intent on sabotaging Alberta?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we have been there for the oil and gas sector of Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Newfoundland and Labrador from the get-go. Last month, BDC opened their applications for companies with revenues between $100 million and $500 million. They were financially viable before the pandemic. Loan amounts now will fall between $12.5 million and $60 million. Our government has been supporting smaller companies in that field for months with the BCAP program. They make up 85% of the jobs in the oil and gas sector, and we have their backs. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Lakeland. Oh, I'm sorry, we're out of time. The honourable member for Foothills.
The Agriculture Minister has, in her own department stats, have shown that 10,000 agri-invest accounts have an account balance of zero. 73,000 agri-invest accounts have less than $10,000. But yet, during this pandemic, she is telling Canadian farmers empty accounts and money that you do not have before she's willing to lift a finger. When is the Agriculture Minister going to start doing her job, develop a program specifically for Canadian farm families to help them through this pandemic and protect a vital pillar of our food supply chain?
The Honourable Minister.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Colleague, everything we have done for the agricultural sector since the beginning. We have changed the eligibility to the Canada Emergency Business Account that will allow a greater number of farmers to apply. And it could mean up to $670 million from the forgivable portion only. $58.3 million have been announced very recently to boost the temporary foreign workers program. $125 million through Agri Recovery. The launch of the Emergency Processing Fund, $77.5 million, and I could go on.
Happy the minister brought up the Canadian Emergency Business Account, which actually they've managed to give more money to their friends at WE in 2 weeks than they have to an entire industry of agriculture. And the minister knows that she keeps telling farmers, use the CEBA account, that's all you're going to need. She knows most farmers do not qualify for that program because they use personal business accounts, and most of their expenses do not qualify for the CEBA program. When is the minister going to stop making excuses to find every way possible not to help Canadian farmers and expand the eligibility criteria for CEBA so these farmers can access this program?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have made significant changes to different programs. We have changed the eligibility criteria to include a greater number of farmers. We are working very hard with the provinces right now to see how we can improve different business risk management programs. But let me remind you that these business risk management programs allow the farmers to get at least an average of $1.6 billion a year, and it might be closer to $2 billion this year, in addition to all the other investments that we've made.
L'honorable député de Rivière-du-Nord.
Merci, Monsieur.
The honourable member for Rivière-du-Nord. Thank you. Mr. Chair, initially, the fees for We Charity were supposed to be $19 million to implement the program. Now it says it's $43 million. Why? The members of the Committee of Finance asked me to appear. I appeared to answer questions. May I ask the Minister to start again? We'll just stop the clock, and we're going to ask the Minister to start her answer again. Yes, after your question, it will go back to the way it was. The Honourable Minister. The details of the contribution agreement were shared with the members of the Finance Committee. As we were requested to do, we shared all the information. Thank you. The Honourable Member. Similarly, initially the program was supposed to be $300 million in value. Then we heard $900 million, and finally the contract says that it's $500 million. Why are these changes? The Honourable Minister.
That this information be out there. So the way the contribution agreement is written, there is the cohort 1, a supplemental cohort, and a cohort 2. The way contribution agreements work is that there's measures into place to ensure that performance measures are in place to...
Monsieur le Président, qu'on faisait affaire avec We Charity.
The Honourable Member, we were told that the program was going to be with We Charity. Then we see that it's actually the We Charity Foundation. Why this bait and switch?
Monsieur le Président, encore une fois.
Mr. Chair, once again, the Finance Committee members asked me to appear before the committee, and I did. And I also went before the Ethics Committee yesterday to answer questions and to ensure that all of the information is shared. The Honourable Member for Rivière-du-Nord. We were told that the only organization that could manage this program was We Charity because it had a network throughout Canada. But now we're learning that there was no network in Quebec or in Francophone communities outside Quebec, and that part of the program had to be subcontracted. Why? On the contrary, Mr. Chair, we stated that the public service had made a recommendation that the We Charity was the only organization that could take care of the program on the timeline. And we asked that all provinces and territories be part of the program. The Honourable Member for Rivière-du-Nord. In parallel to this program to assist We Charity and friends of the Trudeau and Morneau families, this government had also created a program called the Wage Subsidy Program to help the Liberal family, which has up till now received $800,000, and now it's been extended until next December. Why? The Honourable Minister.
Je m'excuse, Monsieur le Président. Je dois le faire en français.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. I just needed to switch to French. Mr. Chair, the wage subsidy is very important. With the extension, it will be made available to all organizations in our country that have seen their income decrease. In this way, there will be more jobs throughout our country. This is an important approach during the pandemic. The Honourable Member. Well, when it comes to being caught with your hand in the cookie jar, Mr. Chair, this government also offered an $83 million contract to a company where the spouse of the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff is VP. Why?
Is an arm's-length Crown corporation that is responsible for its own operations. They made the independent decision to have MCAP as the administrator for KECRA.
Le député de Rivière-du-Nord.
Après les scandales et les...
Well, we've seen scandals and apologies for his holidays with the Aga Khan, the SNC-Lavalin scandal, now the We Charity scandal. Now there's a new scandal with the mismanagement of the wage subsidy program, assistance to the Trudeau and Morneau families, and now this is extended to the family of the PM's Chief of Staff. Why? The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
The Crown Corporation that is responsible for its own operations, they made the independent decision to have MCAP administer the Canada Emergency Commercial Rental Assistance Program.
Député de Rivière-du-Nord.
Pourquoi, Monsieur le Président?
The Honourable Member. And why this week, while we're trying to figure out what's really behind all these scandals, this is not a monopoly game. We're talking about real money, hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars. We're trying to understand what's been done here. And why isn't the Prime Minister here in the House? Why? It's like he's trying to make a laughingstock of Quebecers and taxpayers. I would like to remember that it is not acceptable to refer to the presence or absence of someone in the House. The Honourable Minister.
Merci d'avoir clarifié votre...
Thank you for clarifying. Thank you for clarifying that. I think my colleague should take inspiration from his leader. Earlier, they spoke of ensuring that we continue to work in the right direction, and I think the Bloc should do the same thing. We need to concentrate on what matters to Canadians and Quebecers. Well, listen, when I hear from people in my riding, I'm hearing about economic security, health, and so on.
L'honorable député de Marc-Aurèle-Fortin.
The Honourable Member for Marc-Aurèle-Fortin. Thank you. I will be sharing my time with the member for Don Valley North. May I continue, please? Canadians were shocked and saddened by the recent explosion that occurred in Beirut, in Lebanon. I would like to start by expressing the solidarity I feel towards all Lebanese after this tragic event, where many people died and with thousands of people wounded. And I would like to present my most sincere condolences to all those who were affected by this tragedy. And I hope that the wounded will recover quickly. I'm also thinking of all those who are still searching for their friends and relatives. And the near and dear of Canadian citizens in Lebanon can communicate with the nearest Global Affairs Canada Emergency Response Center 24/7. In order to help the Lebanese people, our government will provide up to $30 million in humanitarian aid. Could the Minister of International Affairs to give us more details on that? The Honourable Minister. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank the member for his question and for all of his support towards the Lebanese community. And I'd like to also thank all my other colleagues from both sides of the House, including particularly my colleague for Laval-les-Îles, who has close ties with Lebanon and the Lebanese community here in Canada. What I can say is that all members here in this House have been crucial in helping formulate our response to this tragedy. Like my colleague, I would like to express my solidarity towards the Lebanese people after the tragic events of last week. These events have shocked all Canadians. On behalf of the Canadian government, I would like to present my most sincere condolences to the families of the victims and wish a speedy recovery to all those wounded. In order to respond to this tragedy, we have created an emergency fund, a matching fund, with $25 million additional dollars for this crisis, for a total of $30 million that the Minister of Development, International Development announced recently with the Prime Minister. These additional funds will help trusted partners in order to assist Lebanese people and support a recovery. The Canadian people have also always been a partner of Lebanon, and we will continue to do so.
Valley North.
Thank you, Speaker. A Team Canada response to COVID-19 has been essential in protecting the health and safety of Canadians these past few months, and will continue to be important as we move forward in our continued response to COVID-19 and recovery. But this pandemic has also had a significant economic and social impact on communities across Canada. I've heard from many residents in Don Valley North who are asking for help getting back to work in a safe and responsible manner. That's why I was so pleased to see the Prime Minister announce the Safe Restart Agreement, which was reached with provinces and territories. And I was especially happy to see the relief for the City of Toronto, who employs many frontline workers, keeping our loved ones healthy and safe during this pandemic. In addition to providing services that residents of Don Valley North rely on, this includes the support for TTC, an essential service that so many of us rely on every day to keep us moving across the city. Speaker, through you to the Minister of Infrastructure and Communities, could she tell this House what the government is doing to help the safe restart of our economy? Thank you.
Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank the member for Don Valley North for his important question. Now is the time to help communities like the City of Toronto build back up from the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. That's a key part of the $19 billion Safe Restart Agreement between our federal government and the provinces and territories. This agreement includes $2 billion in federal funding matched by provinces and territories for cities and towns across Canada. Funding that will support frontline workers and critical municipal services as we keep people safe during the economic restart. The Government of Canada has also agreed to match more than $1.8 billion to help cities keep their transit systems running so that Canadians can get to work and home to their families safely. For Ontario, the federal government has committed $1 billion for public transit, which the province is matching. We're supporting the frontline workers who are making an economic recovery possible, because people depend on these critical frontline services, including public transit, to get safely back to work and to build back up our economy. If our cities aren't running, our economy isn't running. The Safe Restart Agreement will help Canada get back on track.